It's 1989, the Motor Vehicle Act.
Order the bill to pass. Order the title be as read by the clerk. Order the bill be engrossed. The Honourable Government House Leader.
Mr. Speaker, would you please call public bills for third reading?
Public bills for third reading.
Speaker, would you please call Bill number 90?
Bill number 90, Highway 104 Western Alignment Act.
Mr. Speaker, I'm pleased to move this bill for third reading. It's a very simple bill that accommodates a request from or at least a recommendation from the Auditor General that the annual report of the Western Alignment Corporation be tabled in the House each year, as we have been doing. Mr. Speaker, I move third reading.
The Honourable Member for Pictou West.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise in support of Bill 90. I think it's good time, or it's about time, perhaps, to have this come to the minister every year, and it's surprising, I guess, that it hasn't been done at this point, and that was certainly the recommendation of the Auditor General, also that it be on the minister's desk every year. And really, it's just a housekeeping bill that would allow that to happen. As I mentioned, I guess on second reading, Mr. Speaker, I hope now the minister has the report. Certainly, he'll have a chance to look at it and see if there's some way to eliminate the toll road that's up there on the 104. It's I think we're the only province in Canada that has a toll on our Trans-Canada highway system, and it's past time to abolish that toll. So other than that, Mr. Speaker, I'm certainly supportive of the bill.
The Honourable Member for Cape Breton West.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Speaker. We too in the Liberal caucus support this particular piece of legislation. Housekeeping measure, obviously, in content. Or in essence, two other issues like the flag at the same time while dealing with this. It's one, perhaps on a future day, it's an opportunity to raise the issue of this whole contractual agreement and the issue of profitability and the rates that keep changing and going up. And also, too, the fact that because of this particular agreement, the restrictions that have been put on the Department of Transportation and Public Works with regards to the old highway and how that impacts on the residents along that highway as well. So with that, Mr. Speaker, we'll certainly support this.
Recognize all Minister of Transportation Public Works to close debate on Bill number 90.
Yes, Mr. Speaker, and just in response to the comments of the member for Pictou West, I would remind him that we are just putting into law what we have been practicing. In other words, the ministers of transportation over the years, and that includes back into the last Liberal regime. Annually, that report has been tabled in the House by the Minister of Transportation. So, Mr. Speaker, I now move third reading of Bill number 90.
Third reading, Bill number 90. Is the House ready for the question? All those in favour say aye. Counterminded, nay. Motion is carried.
Bill 90, title and act amend Chapter 4, the Acts of 1995, the Highway 104 Western Alignment Act.
Order the bill to pass. Order the title be as read by the clerk. Order the bill be engrossed. Honourable Government House Leader.
Speaker, would you please call Bill number 92, the Motor Vehicle Act?
Bill number 92, Motor Vehicle Act. The Honourable Minister of Transportation Public Works.
Mr. Speaker, I'm pleased to move third reading of Bill number 92.
The Honourable Member for Pictou West.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker. Just a few brief comments on this particular bill, too. I think it's basically a housekeeping bill once again, and there's a variety of different things in it, common sense type of items that I think need to be cleaned up. Certainly one measure that's mentioned there is around securing loads on commercial vehicles, and we all know there's a lot of trucks on our highways these days, and the idea of having them secured safely is to be commended. There's another section in there around revoking driver's licenses or transfer of driver's licenses from other provinces, and where they've lost their license for whatever offense might have occurred in other provinces. It makes sense that when they move to Nova Scotia, that their license should be continued to be revoked. And I think there's another clause in there around transit buses and the right to help move people quicker into the core of cities, and taking away or putting priority signals in at intersections to make transit buses go smoother or quicker. Certainly support anything that's going to allow for more vehicles off the road and more public transit in any area of the province. And I guess the main feature that I've noticed in the bill, Mr. Speaker, is around roundabouts. I guess there's several rotaries in the province at this present time. They're going to be transferred or changed to roundabouts. The one I'm most familiar with is the Pictou rotary. Certainly, over the years, Mr. Speaker, there's been some accidents there, especially with ferry traffic coming in once an hour, and there's just a whole number of vehicles coming in, and so anything that will make the Pictou rotary safer, I'm certainly supportive of. I understand the main change is that instead of a one-on-one merging of traffic, it would be you would have to yield coming into a roundabout, and let's hope that that works. And I understand there's going to be some practice in the roundabout in Cornwallis, I believe, is where it's going to be tried out and see if it works well. So overall, Mr. Speaker, I think Bill 92 is good. It's a hodgepodge of changes to the Motor Vehicle Act, and our caucus is in support of Bill 92. Thank you.
The honourable member for Cape Breton West.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker. We too support this bill, although I must say I'm somewhat suspect of this issue on the roundabouts that the minister's referred to. But with cautious optimism, we'll certainly give it the green light. And the other issues that have been raised, we've already spoken to those. And also, it's an opportunity to actually compliment the minister for moving ahead on the issue of inspections with regards to the heavy vehicles, particularly for the overweight vehicles, the installation of the new electronic system and at the Strait of Canso. And I think that's very positive. I think given the fact that the total number of inspections seem to have been going down in recent years, for obvious reasons, it could be, staffing, budgetary, and it's very difficult with the increased traffic, and I understand that. So perhaps I would also take an opportunity to encourage the minister to do that at other stations across the province, because it would certainly facilitate and make our highways much safer. But that is a very positive initiative. It's something that has been actually activated with very little fanfare, and I think the people of Nova Scotia probably don't realize to the extent of the success of that particular initiative, and I felt it only fair to raise that in support of the minister. So with that, we do support this bill.
Recognize the Honourable Minister of Transportation Public Works. We close debate on Bill number 92. The Honourable Minister.
Yes, Mr. Speaker, I appreciate the comments from the honourable members opposite, and I can assure them that the Motor Vehicle Act is a live type of an act that's continually being amended to reflect modern practices. And Mr. Speaker, with those few remarks, I'll move third reading of Bill number 92.
Third reading of Bill number 92. Is the House ready for the question? All those in favour say aye. Contrary-minded, nay. Motion is carried.
Bill 92, entitled an act to amend Chapter 293 of the revised statutes 1989, the Motor Vehicle Act.
The bill do pass. Order the title be as read by the clerk. Order the bill be engrossed. Honourable Government House Leader.
Speaker, would you please call Bill number 93, the Gas Distribution System Municipal Taxation Act?
Bill number 93. The Honourable Minister of Service, Nova Scotia, and Municipal Relations.
Mr. Speaker, I'm pleased to move Bill number 93.
For third reading. Recognize the Honourable Minister. Now, member Halifax Atlantic.
I'm pleased to speak for a moment on the third reading of this bill. I think it's a very important first step towards a general review of property taxation and the basis of that in Nova Scotia, and I certainly commend the government for bringing this forward. So with that, I'm happy to see this proceed. Thank you.
The Honourable Member Cape Breton West.
No, I guess not. Natural gas.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker. We have no problems with this moving forward. With a cautionary note, that would be interested to see how this entire system will unfold, particularly through the regulatory process, because our intent, and if the minister is correct in what he says, that this will level the playing field and ensure fair and equitable distribution of taxation for the municipalities with regards to the gas distribution systems throughout Nova Scotia. So I would hope that in the very near future, the minister would be able to provide for the opposition parties at least a draft copy of the regulations before the final draft is approved by the Executive Council. So with that note, Mr. Speaker, we'll certainly be willing to give it an opportunity to realization.
Recognize the Honourable Minister of Service, Nova Scotia, Municipal Relations, to be to close debate on Bill number 93. The Honourable Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I'm pleased to close debate on Bill number 93. In doing so, I just want to take a minute to thank the UNSM and our staff and Halifax Regional Municipality who worked collaboratively to bring this bill forward. This bill represents municipalities and the province working together to support a new industry in Nova Scotia, and shows that together, collaboratively, we can resolve issues and move forward with initiatives that will support and benefit all Nova Scotians. I close third reading of Bill number 93.
The question is for third reading of Bill number 93. Is the House ready for the question? All those in favor say aye. Contrary-minded, nay. Motion is carried.
Bill 93, entitled An Act Respecting the Municipal Taxation of a Natural Gas Distribution System.
The bill do pass, or the title be as read by the clerk, or the bill be engrossed. The Member Government House Leader.
Speaker, would you please call Bill number 98, the Municipal Government Act?
Bill number 98, the Honourable Minister of Service, Nova Scotia, and Municipal Relations.
Mr. Speaker, I'm pleased to move third reading of Bill number 98.
I recognize the Honourable Minister of Service, Nova Scotia, and Municipal Relations, to be to close debate on Bill 98. The Honourable Minister.
I'm pleased to close debate on Bill number 98, an act to amend Chapter 18 of the Municipal Government Act, 1998, Municipal Government Act.
Motion is for third reading of Bill number 98. Is the House ready for the question? All those in favor say aye. Contrary-minded, nay. Motion is carried.
98, entitled An Act to amend Chapter 18 of the Acts of 1998, the Municipal Government Act.
Or the bill do pass, or the title be as read by the clerk, or the bill be engrossed. The Honourable Government House Leader.
Speaker, would you please call Bill 103, the Regulations Act?
Bill number 103, Regulations Act. The Honourable Minister of Transportation Public Works.
Yes, Mr. Speaker, on behalf of the Minister of Justice, I move third reading of Bill number 103.
The Honourable Member for Cole Harbour Eastern Passage.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Just a couple of minutes on third reading on this bill for the record. This is a piece of legislation that will allow for the electronic version, the e-version of the regulations that will be on the computer, internet, and intranet system to be recognized as the official version. There are obviously potential challenges with this. The government has already developed a system that I have confidence will be secure. I want to ensure on the record, as I said at second reading, that they continue to be diligent in ensuring security of this system, because in many ways, and some may know or may not know this, the court system relies on judicial notice with regard to regulations and statutes, that what is before them is the legitimate written version. And that's easy to do when you make a photocopy, or a judge has a version of the bill or the regulation or the statute in their possession, or a photocopy is presented to them on a piece of paper where you obviously can't alter it. When it's a computer version, there is a greater possibility of altering. I have confidence, having spoken to the Department of Justice, that this is something they have considered. I want to reiterate our caucus's desire to ensure that they remain diligent, continue to be diligent, because we all know, and this could involve fairly serious litigation matters, Mr. Speaker, or quasi-criminal matters, that computer systems change rapidly, and we must ensure that the security remains such as well. Having said that, we will support this bill, Mr. Speaker.
Recognize the Honourable Member for Cape Breton West.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The only cautionary note that I would add is the fact that we're empowering this new registrar for regulations to be able to interpret certain words and phrases in the regulations for greater clarity, and particularly when there's an intent to combine regulations under a particular act or a grouping, a number of acts. So I would certainly indicate that the overall intent of the bill is good, but I am quite concerned about the possibility that regulations could be drafted one day with the general intent that Cabinet may have a feeling that the regulation is to be interpreted one way, and then on a future day the individual in charge can certainly put his own interpretation on that, which it may be minor, but it could be rather significant in what the intent of the regulations are. So with that having been said, I think the government House Leader can certainly appreciate what I'm saying, and perhaps it's an issue that Cabinet can deal with. Since we are leaving it at the regulatory matter, then, so be it. Thank you.
Recognize the Honourable Minister of Transportation Public Works to close debate on Bill number 103. The Honourable Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I've taken note of the remarks by the members opposite, Mr. Speaker, and I'll pass them on to the Attorney General. And with that, Mr. Speaker, I move third reading of Bill number 103.
Motion is for third reading of 103. House ready for the question. All those in favor say aye. Contrary-minded, nay. Motion is carried.
Bill 103, entitled an act to amend Chapter 393, the Revised Statutes 1989, the Regulations Act.
Order the bill do pass, or the title be as read by the clerk, order the bill be engrossed. The Honourable Government House Leader.
Mr. Speaker, would you please call the order of business private and local bills for third reading?
Private and local bills for third reading.
Mr. Speaker, would you please call Bill number 82, the Halifax Regional Water Commission Act?
Bill number 82. The Honourable Member for Waverley Fall River Beaverbank.
Mr. Speaker, I'd like to move third reading of Bill number 82, Halifax Regional Water Commission Act.
The Honourable Member for Halifax Atlantic.
Yes, Mr. Speaker, I'm very pleased to see this come forward, as I think everybody realizes that we have significant issues with extension of water services throughout the growing municipality, and this is a good way to tidy up the financial arrangements between private and municipal water systems. So to the degree that this will facilitate those arrangements, I'm very pleased to see this bill go forward. Thank you very much.
The Honourable Member for Halifax Clayton Park.
Yes, thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. We would simply like to add our support to this bill and see it move forward. We think it's the right thing to do, and we're satisfied with it. Thank you.
Recognize the Honourable Member for Waverley Fall River Beaverbanks. Close debate on Bill number 82. The Honourable Member.
Mr. Speaker, I'd like to thank the members opposite for their support on this bill. It's really a house cleaning bill that allows Halifax Regional Municipality to make their own arrangements regarding some payment on their water systems. I would like to move third reading of number 82, Halifax Regional Water Commission Act.
Motion is for third reading Bill number 82. Is the House ready for the question? All those in favor say aye. Contrary-minded, nay. Motion is carried.
Bill 82, entitled an act to amend Chapter 55, the Acts of 1963, the Halifax Regional Water Commission Act.
Order the bill do pass. Order the title be as read by the clerk. Order the bill be engrossed. The Honourable Government House Leader.
Yes, Mr. Speaker, would you please call public bills no, I'm sorry, Mr. Speaker. Would you please call private and local bills for second reading?
Private and local bills for second reading.
Mr. Speaker, would you please call Bill number 127, the Pictou Regional Development Commission Act?
Bill number 127, Pictou Regional Development Commission Act. The Honourable Deputy the Premier.
Yes, Mr. Speaker, on behalf of the Premier, I move second reading of Bill number 127.
Motion is for third reading of Bill number 127. Is House ready to question? Second reading of Bill number 127. House ready for the question. All those in favor say aye. Contrary-minded, nay. Motion is carried.
Bill 127, entitled an act to amend Chapter 32 of the Acts of 1991, the Pictou Regional Development Commission Act.
Order the bill before the Committee on Private and Local Bills. The Honourable Government House Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Would you now call public bills for second reading?
Public bills for second reading.
Mr. Speaker, would you please call Bill number 125?
Bill number 125, the Honourable Member of Colchester North.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I'm pleased to begin debate during the second reading of this legislation. As you know, Bill 125 is an act respecting mandatory testing and disclosure to protect victims of crime, emergency service workers, and other persons. Mr. Speaker, this addresses an important health issue. Under current law, an emergency service provider, police officer, firefighter, peace officer, or correctional worker has no legal way to compel an individual to be tested for a communicable disease. In a case where the worker feels he or she may have been exposed to a disease through contact with that individual. The same is true for a victim of crime. This bill provides assistance to those who may have been exposed and to those who may have a communicable disease. Mr. Speaker, the Act sets out the procedure to compel such testing. For example, a police officer responding to a crime may be concerned about exposure to the bodily fluid of a person they are arresting. If that person were unwilling to provide a sample voluntarily, the officer could go to court to get an order called a testing order, compelling the person to provide a sample. To get such an order, the officer would have to bring an application and provide evidence as to the nature of the contact and the risk which he or she may have been exposed. If the judge determines, based on evidence, that the source person should be tested in order to decrease or eliminate a health risk to the officer, the judge can order a medical officer of health to take a sample, have it tested, and provide test results to the officer. It would be against the law for a person to disobey the testing order issued by a judge. Information about the test would remain confidential. Just to repeat, the Act would only apply if the exposed individual came in contact with a bodily substance of the source individual in specified circumstances. Those are, as a crime victim or while providing such services as a police officer, correctional officer, service worker, firefighter, or peace officer. It's important to make clear that any information gathered through these procedures is to be used for the protection of an individual's health only, and not for any criminal prosecution or civil lawsuit. Mr. Speaker, this legislation attempts to balance the privacy rights of individuals with the health needs of those who respond to emergency situations and victims of crime. And Mr. Speaker, when I was doing the research on this, I was looking at many cases where people did come in contact with another person's bodily fluids. And 3 cases I want to elaborate on, which involve police women doing police work. Where one police woman in Hamilton, Ontario, was punched in the mouth by a perpetrator who had blood on his hands. Another one, which also occurred in Ontario, another policewoman, a sergeant on the Ottawa City Police Force. And I met her personally last year at the Atlantic Women Police and Law Enforcement in Truro. And her story, and I listened to her story, and it was her story and a young police constable from Truro, who I'll elaborate in a minute. It was her story of what she went through that really gave me concern about our men and women in the police, our paramedics, our firefighters, our correctional service workers, our good Samaritans, people that come to the aid of these people, and these people who are exposed every day of their life in these situations. And her story was that while searching an individual, she was pricked by a needle. Now, there is no mandatory regulation in Canada that required a person to give a sample of their blood. She didn't know what was involved. She didn't know what she might come in contact or contract. So anyway, with no legislation, her only option was to try to get him to voluntarily give a sample of his blood. And she succeeded. What she had to do, she had to go to the local coffee shop and buy him a cup of coffee. That was what he wanted in order for him to give a sample of his blood, which she did. and she obtained a sample of his blood. Now, having said that, in a more local issue, in Truro, a young police woman constable in Truro was pricked by a needle while searching a person. This young constable went 6 months. She didn't know what she came in contact when she was pricked by this needle. She went to bed every night not knowing what she had. And anyway, it came out later on that she did contract a communicable disease. And her story was told here in this very legislature, outside this legislature, when I brought in the previous act. And it was very, very heartwarming to hear her story. And I just mentioned these three in passing, and I want to also, Mr. Speaker, elaborate on what is occurring now across Canada. And I'm going to pinpoint, Mr. Speaker, a city in the Maritimes, where in 1 year, Mr. Speaker, there has been 13, that's right, 13 cases of robbery by persons using a hypodermic needle with a substance, a red substance. And Mr. Speaker, years ago, and I know during my 30 years as a police officer and working in different parts of Ontario and Nova Scotia, that I never had any protective clothing, which they have today. We didn't wear bulletproof vests. We didn't have rubber gloves issued. In fact, Mr. Speaker, we were naive, very naive. And back then, AIDS and so on wasn't a problem. But as time goes on, time changes, and we as legislators ought to change with the times. And I say this in all sincerity, Mr. Speaker, that to me this is very important legislation. We have an obligation to protect the citizens of the province of Nova Scotia. And in this small way, by passing this legislation, Mr. Speaker, we'll be doing just that. And it wouldn't be a big problem, Mr. Speaker. Last year in Ontario, which has legislation, which is the only province in Canada, there were only 12 times in the past 12 months that they sought an order to draw blood from a person. And so having a population of well over 12 million people, with Nova Scotia having a population of less than 1 million people, we are probably looking at this occurring maybe 2 times, 1 or 2 times, maybe no times. But the legislation will be there, Mr. Speaker. And I believe it's good legislation, and I look forward to hearing the opposition. And with that, I'll close and move second reading of this bill, 125. Thank you.
The honourable member for Sackville-Cobequid.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and it's a privilege for me to stand and speak and debate on a bill that affects many of my former colleagues. Not only does this bill, Mr. Speaker, affect the paramedics of this province and my colleagues that work in emergency health services here in Nova Scotia. This bill really does affect and impact a lot more than just those individuals, Mr. Speaker. This bill, if passed, will impact and affect all healthcare, excuse me, Mr. Speaker, all healthcare professionals, not only paramedics, but a whole range of healthcare providers, Mr. Speaker. This bill also will impact and affect firefighters in the province, Mr. Speaker. It'll affect police officers in this province, Mr. Speaker. And there's a whole list of individuals that make a living or volunteer in our province in the healthcare system or in the emergency services field, Mr. Speaker. People like first responders, who many in this province do so with no compensation or no pay, and many of them are in rural Nova Scotia and provide a great and necessary service to the residents of our province, Mr. Speaker. Not only these people will be affected and will see something change or be able to benefit from possible passing of this bill, Mr. Speaker, but the victims of crimes too, Mr. Speaker, who I think this bill represents an important part of the residents of Nova Scotia, because these people, not only if they find themselves as a victim of a crime, are in a terrible situation, Mr. Speaker. Not only do they have to get over the fact that they were involved in an incident that may have caused them injuries, either superficial or emotional injuries, but they also have to deal with the fact that the potential is there for them to contract, a disease of some sort, such as HIV, hepatitis, or many other diseases that are fatal, Mr. Speaker, if gone untreated or unnoticed, Mr. Speaker. The quicker you can determine what an individual or what a bodily substance had in it that you were exposed to, the quicker you can start treatment, Mr. Speaker. And I think that's important that we recognize that this bill really does and really will affect many people in Nova Scotia and across the country, because I think we need to set an example that I know will radiate throughout the country, Mr. Speaker, and radiate down through the states, because there are states that have introduced bills pertaining to this bill and this aspect of obtaining a check on what's involved in bodily substance, Mr. Speaker. So we're not the first ones to bring this forward, but I hope we're not the last ones that introduce such bill to the province of Nova Scotia. Mr. Speaker, I would like to also say that this bill not only will affect emergency services workers and victims of crimes, but it's also going to affect the family members of these people that deliver this service in our province. Because, Mr. Speaker, personally, I know that with a young family at home and a spouse, that many times over the years I've been left wondering if the call or the incident I was on or attending to, Mr. Speaker, was there a possibility that I may have contracted something from that call or from that incident, Mr. Speaker, and it plays on you. It's hard to go home and be with your family and enjoy some time with your young kids, knowing that a few hours earlier you were in a situation that was very dangerous, and the high likelihood of something being transmitted between myself and the patient I was involved with was very high. So this will affect the families of the people involved in providing and serving the people in Nova Scotia. The other thing I want to mention, Mr. Speaker, is that I want to kind of bring forward some of the experiences I've gone through and bring light and hopefully shed some light on the environment that my profession finds yourselves into, and also other healthcare workers and emergency workers such as police officers and firefighters. Mr. Speaker, these people, and like myself, do this job because they enjoy the thrill of it, I guess. They enjoy being able to be counted on in a situation of really when there's total chaos in areas, Mr. Speaker, or in an incident. We enjoy being able to help our fellow residents in the province. It's something I've enjoyed over many years as a paramedic, and I do it knowing that there is dangers out there, Mr. Speaker, and I know many of my colleagues and many of the other health professionals and other emergency service workers do it because they enjoy that they have the opportunity to help and hopefully alleviate some of the suffering that the patients or the incidents or the calls that we go on, Mr. Speaker. So the men and women, like I say, Mr. Speaker, that are involved with emergency services and police officers and correctional officers and first responders and actually first aiders, Mr. Speaker, they do this on a 24-hour a day, 7 days a week basis, Mr. Speaker. They are here to protect, to serve, and to treat the people of our province. And I think it's important as legislators, as a legislature, to introduce bills that help with them to do their jobs to the best of their abilities and to protect them, Mr. Speaker. And I think this bill is a sense of another avenue of protecting the people that serve all the residents in this province, Mr. Speaker. And if there's anything we can do, and if there's anything I can do to help this and to hopefully encourage more legislation in the future that will address safety issues, especially in the workplace, then I definitely will stand up and speak in favor of those bills and make the government more accountable and hopefully increase the number of bills that we see pertaining to workplace safety, Mr. Speaker. As a paramedic, Mr. Speaker, part of our training relates to the safety of our job. It's enshrined in the education system as a paramedic, and it is one of the first things you learn about, Mr. Speaker. I know earlier, years ago, when safety precautions wasn't such a big issue when it came to paramedics or EMTs or police officers, it was the old ways, the nurses. They did their jobs with no universal precautions, wearing no gloves or no masks or no safety visors. I'm sure yourself, Mr. Speaker, as a former peace officer, found yourself in situations where you may have had bodily substance such as blood all over you when you attend calls. I know many of my colleagues that have been in the system for a long time talked to me and have spoken about the times that they've gone on calls where, like they said, they were elbow deep with blood and other bodily substance. It's not a nice topic to talk about, Mr. Speaker, but these professionals and healthcare professionals and workers in the province, that's what they did, Mr. Speaker. So it was great to see that universal precautions were starting to take place many years ago, and that it enshrined the education system of these healthcare professionals, and it did find its way into the education of emergency health workers, paramedics, firefighters. Mr. Speaker, like I say, it was one of the first things you learned, Mr. Speaker, was to take precaution, and that you have to deal and consider every call you go on as a potential threat, and that the patient or the victim that you were going to help has some kind of disease that could harm you if bodily fluids were transferred, blood or urine or vomit, Mr. Speaker. So it was enshrined in my training as an EMT and as a paramedic in the early days, and we really take that seriously, Mr. Speaker. Every call I've gone on, I've ensured that I had the safety equipment and the precautions in place. Scene safety is the number one thing that you look at, Mr. Speaker, when you arrive on any call. And I'm sure it's the same as a police officer, it's the same as a first responder or a firefighter, and even as a nurse in the ER. You have to make sure the scene around you is safe and you use all precautions at all times. So that's not the question of looking at this bill and saying that, it's, I know that people will look at this and think that there is some, it'll raise some concerns with being able to go to an individual or request, and actually if you go through the process and demand a sample of their blood, if that's the procedure or the clinical aspect of what you need to obtain from them to get the proper testing. I know people will think that it's invasive or invades their personal rights. But, Mr. Speaker, we have to look at it in the context of what are the rights of the workers in this province, and what are the rights of the people that are providing this, this important service, Mr. Speaker. They too need some rights, and I think this bill just emphasizes that the government will be behind the workers and provide as much care and as much protection as we can for these workers that do this job. And like I say, Mr. Speaker, many of the times it's in a dangerous environment. The situation isn't controlled, Mr. Speaker. In our training as an EMS provider or paramedic, we learn many skills, Mr. Speaker. I've had the opportunity to increase my level of training and obtain the ability to provide advanced care to patients in Nova Scotia. And some of these cares that I can provide, or services I can provide, is like IV access. And that is probably one of the highest incidents that you can have with something like a needle stick, Mr. Speaker. And what I mean by a needle stick is if you were to inject a person with an IV or with a needle, and it for some reason after you inject your patient, you inject yourself, then that would be a needle stick, Mr. Speaker. Fortunately enough, I've been very fortunate, Mr. Speaker, over my 9 years as a paramedic, that I've never been stuck with a dirty needle, Mr. Speaker. And I've been fortunate that way. Not to say that I haven't come in contact with a lot of bodily fluids over the years, Mr. Speaker. It certainly has been the case where I've had to clean myself after a call that I was on. But fortunately enough, I've never had that incident where I've stuck myself with a dirty needle. Many of my colleagues, Mr. Speaker, have had that happen to them. And you feel terrible as a fellow paramedic when your partner or another colleague comes to you and say, listen, this has just happened to me. It's a sick feeling, not only to myself when I hear this, but I can just imagine what the feeling of that paramedic or that healthcare provider is going through at that time, Mr. Speaker. Because even though you don't think of a small little needle, such as an 18 gauge or 20 gauge needle, could do any harms, if you look at it, Mr. Speaker, you can't see anything. But that's not the problem. One little stick from a dirty needle, Mr. Speaker, and it opens the avenue of many diseases that can transform your health and be detrimental to your health. So I do feel that this legislation can add a little bit of protection, not to say that it's going to stop any of these needle sticks or stop any transfers of bodily substance in the future, Mr. Speaker. We can't do that. It's impossible. I guess if healthcare workers were put into a full armored suit, maybe that might stop it. But that's not something that we can look at, Mr. Speaker. The healthcare providers and the emergency workers in this province will continue today and tomorrow and in the future put themselves in danger when they provide the service that they do to the people of Nova Scotia. And I think with the evolution of antibiotics and medications that help fight diseases and viruses across the world today, Mr. Speaker, what that has done is it increases the possibility of these superbugs, as they call them, Mr. Speaker. And there's more things out there now that can harm you other than just HIV. There's hepatitis. There's the SARS outbreak. There's things like MRSA, Mr. Speaker, that can be transported between a patient and a caregiver very easily, Mr. Speaker. And to try to limit those barriers would be very difficult. So I must say that the healthcare providers, emergency workers, and those people that are involved with taking care of people in times of violent crimes or in times of a medical emergency, you just can't. Transmissions of these will still continue into the future, Mr. Speaker. One of the things we can do, though, Mr. Speaker, is help them in deciding on what type of cure or what treatment that these people might be able to go after something like this happens. I would love to say that I hope that nobody in this province would ever have to find themselves in the situation where they would have to use this bill if it's passed, Mr. Speaker, because that's the last thing I want, Mr. Speaker, as a fellow colleague or a fellow Nova Scotian, to go through that stressful time in their lives when they'd have to go through the procedures of obtaining a sample of someone else's blood and go through the court system, Mr. Speaker. But I think by not passing this bill, then we leave it open that these people that give so much in our province, a lot of them are paid people, but there's a lot of volunteers and the victims of crimes. We give them another safety net to know that, you know, after something has happened, they can go somewhere and find out if they have to worry for the next year, the next 2 years, the next 10 years, Mr. Speaker, because after an event where there is a change of bodily substance or a needle stick or blood splash in someone's face, the possibilities of things down in the future is great. And if we have an avenue for these people to go and obtain a court order to have that person give a sample of their blood and get back to the individual who requested it, and under confidentiality, as the bill plainly states, and hopefully it eases their mind a little bit, Mr. Speaker, because that's a great thing to be able to offer the people that put themselves at risk doing their jobs, is just give them the peace of mind that they can go home after the end of their shift, Mr. Speaker, and play with their kids and be with their spouse and not have to worry about what may transpire, what may be able to be transmitted to them, Mr. Speaker. So I definitely encourage all members to really have a look at this and really go back to the communities they represent and go talk to healthcare workers. Go talk to the nurses. Go talk to the paramedics and the firefighters and the police officers. And I bet you if every member did this, they would come back to this legislature with stories of near misses, if you want to call it, Mr. Speaker, or stories of incidents that in their profession that they had come in contact with something that this bill could help them go through and help their families proceed to the next level of getting over what they've gone through. Mr. Speaker, these superbugs that we see today are getting more powerful every day, Mr. Speaker, and we do have checks and balances now in the system. When we do have a patient involved in or is recognized as a patient who is at high risk for some of these diseases, Mr. Speaker, as a paramedic, we do get indications from the hospital or from the communication center that we did transport a high-risk patient. And we go through a large, deep cleaning, Mr. Speaker, of our vehicle, of all the equipment we use. And so there are checks and balances, and I think this can just be an added checks and balance for the people that serve and protect us and treat us every day in this province, Mr. Speaker. The other thing, Mr. Speaker, as I was saying, will give them another level of protection, if you want to call it. Not only for those workers, like I say, but for the family members, the people at our home, hoping that their loved ones...
A lot of noise in the chamber. To ask the members to take their conversations outside or quite a little noisier, less noisy, please. Young member Sackville Cobequid.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. So it will ease those people at home that have loved ones that are out working long hours and are responding to so many different calls and so many different dangerous situations, Mr. Speaker. So that's one thing I want to bring up too, is some of the environments that I found myself in over the years, Mr. Speaker, that really left me wondering at the end of the shift, you know, did I get anything from this call? Was there anything transmitted to me that I might go home and affect my children, my spouse, or my family members, Mr. Speaker? I recall one of the calls that I went on, and before I mention that, Mr. Speaker, as I was saying in the training that we get with the advanced care stuff like IVs and intubations, which is when someone stops breathing, you can actually put a tube into their trachea or into their lungs and breathe for them, Mr. Speaker. When we get trained for this, it's done under a controlled environment, Mr. Speaker. My training was over at the VG in a lab. At first, we used an arm, an IV arm made out of plastic, Mr. Speaker, and we practiced on that to try to get the technique, in a safe technique. That's the main reason why we practice, is make sure we have safe techniques, Mr. Speaker. Then we proceed on to actually our fellow colleagues in the class, my classmates, Mr. Speaker. I turned to my one of my seatmates and we started practicing on each other, Mr. Speaker. But that's the way you get a feel for it. But it was all under a controlled environment, Mr. Speaker. And I remember after graduating, get my license to practice in the province, and I was out on the calls, on the trucks, Mr. Speaker, that's when that controlled environment was taken away from us, Mr. Speaker. And many times over the years, I've found myself in situations that were very dangerous, Mr. Speaker, and that's where I'll give a few examples of some of the calls I've been on, Mr. Speaker, that really took that control out, and we were in an uncontrolled environment, Mr. Speaker. I remember one call, Mr. Speaker, many years ago when we had to hike into to the woods and up a railway track, about a kilometer in the woods, Mr. Speaker, at about 3 in the morning. And for some reason, there was a patient there that had tried to cross that tracks and had fallen down and actually fractured their femur, Mr. Speaker. So not only were we pretty far in the woods, it was the middle of the night, Mr. Speaker. This patient had an injury that was life-threatening, Mr. Speaker. Fracturing a femur, you can, that's one of the largest bone in your body, and it's surrounded by one of the largest muscles in your body, Mr. Speaker. You can bleed out several liters into your thigh, Mr. Speaker. So in this environment we were at, there was no light. We were there with a couple flashlights, Mr. Speaker, and this patient was in dire need of some assistance. One, she needed to get out of there and into tertiary care hospital and get to the OR, Mr. Speaker. Two, this patient was in excruciating pain. Anybody who suffered a fracture, especially a fracture of the femur, Mr. Speaker, pain management is a protocol that we follow, and that it's something that we can provide to try to ease the patient, to try to calm them down a bit. And actually, it also works in the fact that we can try to manipulate the leg and get them into a mode or an environment where we can transfer them out there, Mr. Speaker. So in that control environment, I was called upon to put an IV in this patient who is, one, has been there for a long period of time, who is definitely in shock, Mr. Speaker, and is in excruciating pain. And that's where I want to bring attention to, is the environment that we're in, and the environment of where I have to perform my job, and to insert an IV catheter into this patient and deliver medication to try to help this patient get her out of there, Mr. Speaker. That's just one incident that I remember that could have been bad on my part, Mr. Speaker. Another call that is very important, that the paramedics are able to get fast access, especially IV access, is when there's a diabetic emergency, Mr. Speaker. I don't know if members are aware or know anybody who's a diabetic, but Mr. Speaker, when their glucose level drops to a point where they have an altered level of consciousness, they're not of sound mind, they're very aggressive, Mr. Speaker, and the one thing that this patient needs is some D50, some sugar, Mr. Speaker, because the two things your brain needs is sugar and oxygen, and if you deplete one of those, Mr. Speaker, it really throws the patient off. And I remember one of my first calls going to a call to an elderly lady, Mr. Speaker, where her levels had dropped and she was very combative, and we had to somehow restrain this lady who actually had 4 firefighters and a paramedic trying to help her and hold her enough that I was able to try to gain access with an IV and give her the D50 she needs, Mr. Speaker. So the environment in that situation is very out of control. We try to bring it to bring as much control as we can to the situation, but in that incident, the likelihood of me putting an IV in this patient and it coming back and sticking in me is very high, Mr. Speaker. So that's just a couple of the calls and some of the environments that I found myself in over the years, that the likelihood of things happening were very high. Other ones are motor vehicle accidents, Mr. Speaker. I'm sure you've, in your former profession, have attended many calls on the highway, on a rural street, or even on a private road, Mr. Speaker, When people are injured in motor vehicle accidents, a lot of the times there's a lot of damage, not only to the vehicle but to themselves, Mr. Speaker. There's a lot of bodily fluids, a lot of blood, tissue, and these people really need advanced care medicine, and they need to be worked on quickly, Mr. Speaker. And one of the reasons I want to bring this call up, Mr. Speaker, because one of the things we're trained is to recognize when you go to a call, Mr. Speaker, is the need for rapid transport. This patient needs to get to an emergency room. They need to get to an OR. And the faster we do it, the better their outcome is, and the more likelihood they are to survive this accident, Mr. Speaker. So with that, a rapid transport would mean that you assess the patient quickly, ensure that they may have an airway, Mr. Speaker, but we want to get them packaged, as we call it, and get them in the truck and on the road. Then we can provide other treatments, Mr. Speaker. If a blood loss or the blood volume loss is significant, we need to replace that by giving them some saline solution, giving them an IV, and hopefully replenish that, because if you lose enough blood, Mr. Speaker, it doesn't take long for your body to go into shock and end up it being fatal, Mr. Speaker. So at that point, when you're in the vehicle, Mr. Speaker, you have to give an IV in a moving vehicle. And it's not a controlled environment, Mr. Speaker. It's pretty tricky at times when you have a patient who has multiple fractures, is bleeding somewhere. You're trying to control the bleeding, but you know you have to try to get an IV access, Mr. Speaker, to get some fluid back in their body so that the shock doesn't progress to the point where their organs are going to start shutting down, Mr. Speaker. So in that case, it's very uncontrolled.
Order, please. There's too much noise in the chamber. I ask all members to take their conversations outside, please. The honourable member for Sackville-Cobequid.
Somebody's got to make some sense in here.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. So in that case, it's very, very dangerous. The likelihood of, like I said, a needle stick is it increases when you have to do treatments like that in a moving vehicle. The other treatments we do on a lot of occasions, Mr. Speaker, and it's not something you want to do, is to intubate somebody, Mr. Speaker. And that, like I said earlier, was the procedure of actually inserting a tube into the patient's trachea to breathe for them, Mr. Speaker. We do it on many occasions. People who have had seizures, people who have had who are in cardiac arrest, anaphylactic reactions to some things, Mr. Speaker. So it's important that we do get an airway, because without an airway, your body, like I say, your brain needs the glucose and oxygen. So in those cases, Mr. Speaker, that is when you have to intubate somebody. And I don't know if the members in the chamber today have ever witnessed somebody being intubated or seen it on TV. It's a procedure where you're very close to the patient. The provider that's trying to intubate is within inches of the patient's mouth. You're trying to look into their mouth and look for that trachea and the vocal cord so you can insert this intubation tube, Mr. Speaker. And a lot of the times the airways, because they've either had a cardiac arrest or other instances, that there's a lot of bodily fluids there, Mr. Speaker. There's a lot of times where things will get sprayed back on you. That's why we use goggles at all times and really try to limit the exposure rate in that case, Mr. Speaker, but it's very difficult. Many times I've been on calls where they've been difficult intubations, Mr. Speaker, where there's a lot of amount of bodily fluids in their airway that you have to try to get out of their either vomit or blood, Mr. Speaker, and that is where the possibility is probably the greatest when there's a transportation of bodily fluids between the caregiver or the provider and the patient or the victim, Mr. Speaker. So in those cases, you know, it's we don't know what the patient has, Mr. Speaker, but it doesn't stop healthcare providers from providing this service to them. I've never said I'm not going to intubate someone because we're in a maybe a lower class area of the province, or we're in a rooming house, or we're in a mansion, Mr. Speaker. That doesn't cross my mind or my colleagues' mind when you're there to help them. all you want to do is hopefully ensure that this patient has a clear airway and you can intubate them, Mr. Speaker. So these environments that healthcare workers put themselves in every day are very dangerous and very uncontrolled, Mr. Speaker. And if this bill gives that level of comfort or gives that provider some support on knowing that, because we did our job and there was a transfer of bodily fluids, that, it's safe. Mr. Speaker, today, if a paramedic or a nurse or somebody does get a needle stick, a dirty needle stick, they can go to the patient and ask them if they're willing to take a test. But they're likely to acknowledge and say yes, no problem, Mr. Speaker. Just like the member from Colchester North stated about a victim or an incident where they wanted a coffee. So I'd buy 100 coffees if they wanted to, Mr. Speaker, if they were willing to take that test. But the point I want to make is that these providers, the patients that you go to, they don't need to give their permission, Mr. Speaker. If they say no, then the door is closed, Mr. Speaker. And the likelihood of this happening is pretty rare, Mr. Speaker. There's a few cases that you might see a patient deny the caregiver that right of giving them the extra comfort, knowing that they don't have anything that can be passed on to them. But, Mr. Speaker, there are cases that this happens. A lot of them deal with when a patient that I go to is in the custody of a police officer or the correctional service, Mr. Speaker, that, for some reason, we're called to a situation, either a domestic dispute or a break and enter, where the perpetrator is a victim, per se, and paramedics or the ambulance is called to attend to this person. And those people have the right to say no. I don't think if it was an interaction between these people and just the paramedics, they would say no. But a lot of people have hostility towards police officers, Mr. Speaker. And when we are called to a scene where there's a crime or a burglary or something like that, the perpetrator, if they're there and they're in custody, they're more apprehensive to even speak with anybody, or let alone agree to taking a blood sample and giving some relief to the medics that are there to help them, Mr. Speaker. And I want to bring this point and make it very clear that as a paramedic, when I go to a call or my colleagues go to a call, they go and put themselves in this dangerous environment. They don't have a choice. As a paramedic, I do not have the choice to go to a call and say, I'm not going to treat this patient. I guess I do have a choice, Mr. Speaker. I could do that. But I can tell you, Mr. Speaker, I wouldn't be working as a paramedic in this province any longer if I were to choose not to treat a patient. Many patients with head injuries or victim of crimes or involved in motor vehicle collisions aren't themselves, Mr. Speaker. They have an altered mental status. Head injury people, and I'm sure many of the members know, and the Premier knows as a physician, that they act quite aggressively. And I'm sure you know, Mr. Speaker, in the past of dealing with people with head injuries. And these people here aren't in the sound mind, and you're there to try to help them. So if I knew that I could go there and I would just refuse treatment, but I don't have that luxury, Mr. Speaker. I wouldn't be working as a paramedic, and I wouldn't keep my tag or my license to work in this province. So I think by making the people and making the healthcare providers in this province do their jobs and not giving them an avenue to go after and hopefully find out that things are okay with what just happened, or if there was a transfer of bodily fluids, that it's safe for them to go home and spend time with their kids, and it's safe to spend time with your spouse or your common law person that you're with, Mr. Speaker. So I wanted to make that very clear, Mr. Speaker, that healthcare providers, emergency service workers, and people who give first aid, lay people who give first aid training or provide first aid to people on the street, they need this added protection because they're out there giving themselves to emergency health services and providing an important important duty to the residents of Nova Scotia, Mr. Speaker.
Somebody's doing their job right.
So as a former paramedic, I still am a paramedic, and most importantly as a a father of 2 kids and a family member. I hope I can find it in the members here to actually go back to their communities and talk to health providers, see what they think about this bill, Mr. Speaker, and I think that most of them, if not all of them, would say that this is a good piece of legislation, that we deserve to have that added protection for these people, Mr. Speaker. This isn't the first time I've seen a piece of legislation like this, Mr. Speaker. The professional association I belong to, the Nova Scotia College of Paramedics, have been working over the years to develop a bill like this, Mr. Speaker. Not only is it this bill, I know, would be endorsed by the Nova Scotia College of Paramedics, it also be endorsed by the Paramedic Association of Canada, which has tens of thousands of members across this country, Mr. Speaker, that have been trying to get bills like this passed throughout different legislatures across this country. And I think our legislature can be in the forefront. There are some that are already passed, but I think we can be looked at as being responsible, a responsible government, a responsible legislature, and give that added protection for these workers, and just give them the peace of mind knowing that there is an avenue that we will look after them and provide this service. In closing, Mr. Speaker, I really want to emphasize that this would also help the victims of crimes. I know a lot of the examples I give is from my profession, which I think is important to show what I've been through and what other paramedics have been through and other healthcare providers. But the victims of crime, Mr. Speaker, and these people are put in a situation where they've had the misfortune of having something done to them, either sexually or violently with either a violent occasion. And not only do they have to try to recuperate from their injuries, they have to mentally get over the fact that they were either violated or they were involved in an act of crime, Mr. Speaker. So I think this is important to them, and it would help in the healing of people who find themselves as a victim of crime, and hopefully get them to a point where they can go on and proceed with their lives, Mr. Speaker. So I look forward to other comments on this bill. I want to commend the honourable member from Colchester North with bringing this bill forward. I really appreciate the efforts of the member, and I think it's a good piece of legislation that we should look at getting through this House. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member for Glace Bay.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I want to first of all congratulate as well the member for Colchester North for bringing forth a piece of legislation, and congratulate the member for Sackville-Cobequid on a fine speech in this legislature, Mr. Speaker, although I thought it was perhaps a bit much when the sound effects and the siren were added in the background as he was talking, Mr. Speaker. You know, at the same time, there just seems to be something about that member for Sackville-Cobequid that I identify with, and something that I like about him. I'm not sure exactly what it is, but he seems to make sense anyway. Mr. Speaker, this is, in all seriousness, this is an important piece of legislation that is now placed before this House. I'm pleased to stand and speak on Bill number 125. It's basically an expanded version of Bill number 83, which, as I understand, is still on the order paper, but we'll deal with this one now, because on the surface anyway, it appears to be a much better idea than the previous bill that was proposed before, Mr. Speaker. It's always, when you're talking about dealing with the, or balancing the rights of individuals with the protection of other individuals, Mr. Speaker, it's always quite a balancing act that you have to pull off in order to protect the rights of individuals. So I think at first blush anyway, Mr. Speaker, we can safely say that this is attempting to do that. It does, and a very important aspect of the bill is that it does put the requirement of an order before the courts, and it allows the person who is required to give a blood sample an appeal process before the courts, which is exactly where that belongs, Mr. Speaker, in our opinion. We know and we understand, and the member for Sackville-Cobequid gave in great detail the many dangers that police officers or paramedics or firefighters or any first responders are faced with. In this legislation goes a little further to to take in many more people, many more healthcare providers that may be affected by something like this. Because again, as the member stated very well, you can take as many safety precautions as you want, but things are still going to happen, and you just can't be entirely protected against something like this, Mr. Speaker. Always, as I said, in situations where people are compelled to do something against their will, the question of their rights under the Charter of Rights and Freedoms is always in question. And, Mr. Speaker, we would certainly be interested in hearing concerns from people on the issue of rights. But overall, Mr. Speaker, overall this appears to be a good idea, in that it protects those who are serving the public and who have the potential to be exposed to potentially life-threatening communicable diseases, Mr. Speaker. For their own peace of mind, being able to know whether or not they've been exposed to a communicable disease makes it a very, very important issue. So, without extending debate any further at this point, Mr. Speaker, we in the Liberal caucus are pleased to see this come before this House, and we'll be very pleased to hear more as it goes through the various stages of the Legislative Assembly, in particular before Law Amendments Committee, when we can hear from the many members of the general public and stakeholders who are affected by such legislation. Thank you very much.
You recognize the member for Timberley Prospect.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to rise for a moment and compliment the member from Colchester North in bringing forth this legislation. It's obviously a piece of legislation as it goes through the law amendments that we're looking forward to supporting the NDP caucus. But in particular, I'd like to take a moment and congratulate the member from Sackville-Cobequid. I want you to know that in my deep, dark, distant past, the member from Sackville-Cobequid was a star athlete and a student of mine at Sackville High School. And I wish I could say that I taught him everything he knows. But let me tell you, sir, Mr. Speaker, when you see this young man who has joined us in this legislature successfully after the last election stand in his place today and speak on a bill of such significance, speak on a bill with knowledge and depth, and at times I want you to know that there were members present from all sides of the House who were sitting, listening, taking notes, and realizing these sorts of personal examples that he brought to our attention are significant ones. They are the sort of things that help legislation like this because of the real examples that are brought forward. And I know, Mr. Speaker, based upon your previous career and the attentiveness that you spend when all of us stand in our place, this particular piece of legislation certainly has merit. It has merit because of how it's been introduced by the member from Colchester North. It has been supported by the member from Glace Bay, and the points that were made by the member from Sackville-Cobequid not only make this older teacher proud, but it makes us as members of the NDP proud to say that the member from Sackville-Cobequid is a member of our caucus. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Recognize the member Colchester North. We close debate on Bill number 125. The honourable member for Colchester North.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Please, Mr. Speaker, close debate for second reading on Bill number 125.
Motion is for second reading of Bill 125. Is the House ready for the question? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Counter-minded, nay. Motion is carried.
Bill number 125, an act respecting mandatory testing and disclosure to protect victims of crime, emergency service workers, and other persons.
Or this bill will be referred to the Committee on Law Amendments. The Honourable Government House Leader.
Speaker, I move that you do now leave the chair and the House resolve in Committee of the whole House on bills.
Agreed? Agreed. Motion is carried.
I'd like to recognize the Government House Leader.
Mr. Chairman, would you please call Bill number 96, the House of Assembly Act?
Bill number 96, House of Assembly Act. Question has been called. Is it agreed? Agreed. Agreed. Does the clause carry? Yes. Does the title carry? Carry. Does the bill carry? Carry. Carry. Recognize the Government House Leader.
Mr. Chairman, would you please call Bill number 99, the Vital Statistics Act?
I call Bill number 99, the Vital Statistics Act. Question has been called. Do the clauses carry? Carry. Does the bill carry? Carry. And the title carry? Carry. Bill is carried. Government House Leader.
Mr. Chairman, I move that your committee do now rise and report these bills.
Considerable progress.
Yes.
Chairman of the committee, the House of Bills reports.
I've been directed to report that the committee has considered bills 96 and 99 and recommends both of these bills to the favorable consideration of this House without amendment.
Is it agreed? Honorable Government House Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, that concludes the business for today. Have we got some private bills there? Okay, just hang on a second, Mr. Speaker. I think we've done all the bills, Mr. Speaker. I don't believe there's any bills remaining. Yeah. Okay, Mr. Speaker, I move the House to now rise to meet on the morrow at the hour of 9 a.m. The House will sit from 9 until 12. The order of business, Mr. Speaker, will be public bills for third reading, private and local bills for third reading, private members' public bills for third reading, public bills for second reading, and committee of the whole House on bills. So with those few words, Mr. Speaker, I move the House to now rise.
Motion is the House adjourned to 9 a.m. tomorrow morning. Is it agreed? All those in favor say aye. Contrary-minded, nay. Motion is carried. We've now reached the moment of interruption. The honourable member for Cape Breton West.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I am pleased to rise, if I can find my material here, and speak on this particular resolution with regards to the condition of roads, particularly in rural Nova Scotia. Because, Mr. Speaker, we've heard the Minister raise on a number of occasions the fact that we have a $2.5 billion deficit on our highway infrastructure here in Nova Scotia. And yet, Mr. Speaker, in the last number of days, we've seen some evidence tabled here before the House whereby the federal government has set aside and still has remaining in its Canada Strategic Infrastructure Fund some $30.5 million for highway improvement in the province of Nova Scotia, and is waiting for the province of Nova Scotia to step up to the plate and match those dollars for further highway improvement. We've heard some indication that perhaps this $30.5 million, when matched, will be able to see the further twinning of Highway 104 between New Glasgow and Sutherland's River, as well as some further upgrade on the Highway 101 twinning, as well as Highway 103. But after that, Mr. Speaker, and that's very positive, I must say, but after that, what is the government going to do? We still have, Mr. Speaker, considerable concern that's being raised within the Department of Transportation and Public Works, the fact that what they're doing is privatizing many of the services. Since this government came to power, Mr. Speaker, they have more than tripled the number or the number of pieces of equipment that have been privatized from the Department of Transportation and Public Works. We've gone from 12 to 39 pieces of equipment that have now been privatized or contracted out. And I think that's sending a very dangerous signal, Mr. Speaker. The Minister of Transportation has equally stated that the RIM program is actually, in many cases, providing a better quality service than what was offered by the departmental staff and all the infrastructure that was provided in-house through the public service. Well, Mr. Speaker, I don't agree with that. I don't agree that the private sector can do a better job than the public service in this province within the Department of Transportation. I don't agree with that. They may do as good, they may do an excellent job, but in all cases that's not true. And I'll give you some examples, Mr. Speaker. What they're doing with the RIM program, they are paving in segmented form. For example, they may pay a kilometer or 2 kilometers or perhaps even as many as 3 kilometers in a stretch, but they're just putting that asphalt on top of a roadbed which is crumbling in a somewhat deteriorated state. So they really haven't stabilized the roadbed. So within 2 to 4, maybe 5 years, that road is in as bad, if not worse shape than it was when they first spent the money on it. So at first glance, it looks like we're getting a good deal for our money, and that's no criticism of the private contractor per se, because they're only doing what they were contracted to do. So, Mr. Speaker, that is nothing short of lip service for rural Nova Scotia. And we can see that if there's ever a deficit with regards to highway infrastructure, it's in rural Nova Scotia. And if we were to take that $2.5 billion and to break it down constituency by constituency, then we'll find, for the most part, rural Nova Scotia is at the losing end of the equation. Last week, I tabled a resolution or a petition here on behalf of the residents down in Plateau, down in the Cheticamp area. The Minister of Tourism, who represents that area, I know is very concerned about that. With the Plateau, the road going up Plateau, up to the mountain there. Well, Mr. Speaker, he said you couldn't do all the roads, but what money is being spent down there, I suppose most of it is going to Tory-held ridings. But if you look at what's being proposed on the next segment of the federal-provincial highway agreement, I will bet you any money that those 3 highway agreements that are being contemplated will go into Tory-held ridings. It's almost as if we're going back to the days of Donald Cameron all over again. And many people know what happened under that particular administration, Mr. Speaker, and what happened when he was Minister of Development for the province of Nova Scotia. 78% of all funding on highways and development dollars went into Tory-held ridings because he wouldn't allow anything differently. There weren't even enough crumbs left to go around to the opposition held ridings, and I would hope that certainly that we don't slip back into that after all the work that's been done to depoliticize the Department of Transportation that was brought forth under the John Savage administration. Mr. Speaker, for example, in my constituency, Highway number 22, it's an issue I raised a little earlier today, the main highway corridor, which sometimes they refer to as the Esplanade or the Parkway going to Louisbourg. The last time that highway was upgraded was in 1969. And yes, Mr. Speaker, different administrations have held power, so they all have to accept some considered responsibility to that. But the reality is that that is having a major negative impact on tourism in and around the Louisbourg area in my constituency. Mr. Speaker, if you go out on, there's one section there not too far away from Albert Bridge, what they refer to as Peck's Hill. Well, if you ever wanted to be a victim of a whiplash, drive over Peck's Hill doing more than 30 miles an hour or 50 kilometers an hour. Now, this is supposed to be the equivalent of a 100 series highway. Now, you've often heard about how successful, Upper Clemens Theme Park was with the roller coaster rides that they have there. Well, that's what the Louisbourg Highway is like. It's Cape Breton's version of the Upper Clemens Theme Park. Now, that's how bad it is, and you'll have people who have never been in that area before and will comment that it's perhaps the worst roads in all of the country, if not certainly Nova Scotia. The Fleur-de-Lis Trail, it's amazing what the government has done. They've actually started putting signs in back roads through Gabroos, through Troutbrook, down through the Big Ridge Highway, areas that have absolutely nothing to do with the Fleur-de-Lis Highway, but because it's the only passable route that they have, that's what they direct the traffic down to get to the Fortress of Louisbourg. Now, if you ever wanted to bring people back in time, have them drive on those roads, because The only thing that some of those roads are good for is a horse and wagon. And Mr. Speaker, I've raised on a number of occasions the fact that the department should at least provide lawnmowers to mow the highways out along that Gabbro stretch. And I don't mean for on the shoulders, I mean the center line, because the grass is literally growing up through the center line of the road. Goats would be a welcome addition, Mr. Speaker, because in the fall we could at least have a barbecue and build some community spirit. I don't know if that would answer the member from Colchester, Musquodoboit Valley's query about goats, but the deplorable state of the roads is an issue of concern. I do acknowledge the fact that the Minister of Transportation and Public Works responded in limited measure to the terrible state of the Marion Bridge Highway. There's some 16 kilometers that have to be upgraded there, and the Minister has responded to 4. Well, at that rate, it's going to take at least 4 to 5 years to get that road completed. Well, they'll be celebrating their 50th anniversary, Mr. Speaker, since that road was last upgraded. I understand my time is concluded. I look forward to further interventions.
Thank you. Recognize the honourable member for Colchester Musquodoboit Valley.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and I welcome an opportunity to rise in my place here this afternoon and speak on the resolution that was put forward by the honourable member for Cape Breton West. And I'm sure the honourable member had it read into the record, but just to reiterate, it's to be it resolved that the government is failing to address the needs of rural Nova Scotia by neglecting transportation infrastructure. And the resolution, while the author is the honourable member for Cape Breton West, it seems like Yogi Berra would say deja vu all over again, because only a short decade ago, the honourable member's colleague and now an aspiring leadership candidate for the Liberal Party and his friend, the former Public Works Minister, ripped away millions and millions of dollars from the SHIP program, the Strategic Highway Improvement Program, when in fact that money should have been earmarked for the 104 highway through Wentworth Valley. And we remember the debates in this legislature. Those of us that may have been around and perhaps those at home will recall that after public outcry and some good work by the opposition, and then, in fact, the Progressive Conservatives and the NDP in 1993 had rather small opposition parties in numbers in the legislature, but very strong in their commitment and resolve that the former Transportation Minister and former Public Works Minister put the money back into the Strategic Highway Improvement Program. And I know some of my honourable colleagues across the floor will recognize and recall the outrage that was felt by Nova Scotians about that dastardly deed. And in fact, Mr. Speaker, a former speaker from a different political party was sitting in that chair when I challenged him and the Liberal Party of the day to put the money back into its rightful place so it could be cost shared with the provincial government and do the things that we're supposed to do as per the terms of the Strategic Highway Improvement Program. So here we are, a few short years later, mind you, a decade I guess has passed, and I can't believe that the honourable member for Cape Breton West has the audacity and the gall, let alone the nerve, to bring forward a resolution like this today. But I commend the honourable member. I know that he would like to see more road work take place in the beautiful province of Nova Scotia. In fact, all members in this chamber, on behalf of their constituents, would like to see more road work take place. Well, I'd like to talk a little bit about some of the improvements, without zeroing in on specifics, that this government has taken to address the concerns that Nova Scotians and not only the motorists of Nova Scotia, but also motorists and truckers from other provinces and other states have been concerned about for a number of years.
Excuse me, in light of an incident that took place a few moments ago, I wonder if we could just dispense of Adjourn debate.
Honorable Speaker, yeah.
So agreed.